In the desert of the Arabian Peninsula, a new kind of leader has emerged, one who refuses to be bound by tradition, expectation, or caution. Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, has become a figure both admired and feared, reshaping his kingdom with a speed and audacity few thought possible. To some, he is a visionary reformer determined to free Saudi Arabia from the chains of oil dependency and religious conservatism. To others, he is an authoritarian who masks repression with promises of modernization. Yet no matter where one stands, his presence is impossible to ignore. In a world where power often moves slowly, MBS thrives on disruption, dismantling old norms and replacing with his own bold vision. His leadership has sparked headlines across the globe, from allowing women to drive and building futuristic megacities, to waging wars and silencing critics. Each move he makes feels like a deliberate shock to the system, a reminder that Saudi Arabia under his rule will no longer be predictable. But what drives this restless ambition? Is it the impatience of youth, the weight of history, or the desire to cement his place on the world stage? Understanding MBS requires stepping into the mind of a leader who thrives on paradox, liberalizing and repressing, modernizing and centralizing, innovating and controlling. He is not merely steering his country. He is attempting to redefine it, and in the process, he is rewriting the narrative of the Middle East itself. This is a story of MBS, the ultimate disruptor of Saudi Arabia, one of the most luxurious hotels in the world. Red Sultanias, where a night's rent is thousands of dollars. But that night, it was not a luxury hotel. Instead, it had suddenly turned into a prison where the prisoners were not ordinary people. They were the most powerful princes of Saudi Arabia, Arab businessmen, and the present minister of service. Those people who were running the country until yesterday, on the sign of their finger, people's fate was being decided. Today, the same people were trying to sleep on the floor of this hotel. No one understood anything. What is going on? Is this a rebellion? Or has there been a conspiracy in the royal palace? No, it was a much more dangerous game than that. This was a campaign run by the royal family, whose mastermind was just one young man. Such a young man who is ambitious and very merciless. Today, the world knows him as MBS, that is, Mohammed bin Salman. After all, who is this Mohammed bin Salman? The one who allows women to drive in a society like Saudi Arabia? The one who opens a cinema? Or the one who is accused of killing his opponent journalist? The one who dreams of a future city? Or the one who wages war on the poorest countries like Yemen? The one who wants to be a great reformer? Or the one who has the full potential to become a merciless dictator? Today, we will decode Mohammed bin Salman on History Speaks and find out how the world's most powerful youngster works, how he thinks. I assure you that in today's video, there will be many things that you have never heard about Mohammed bin Salman. But for this, you will have to do one thing. Yes, subscribe to the channel, share it, and spread it further and further, because we really need you right now. So the first question, where did Mohammed bin Salman come from? He is the seventh son of the current king of Saudi Arabia, Salman bin Abdulaziz, who was born on August 31st, 1985 to the third wife of king. But he did not become famous until Salman bin Abdulaziz became the king in 2015. That too at a time when Saudi politics was at a very delicate turn. No, this was not the delicate turn of Pakistan. It was a very delicate turn. Actually, after the Arab Spring, the whole region was in turmoil. The land was coming out of the feet of the kings. In fact, it had already come out. At that time, a person became king in Saudi Arabia who did not have real power, but the power actually came into the hands of the son. That too in the hands of the son, whose king, let alone becoming a saint, was also very difficult. How did all this happen? First, let's understand the system of succession in Saudi Arabia, which is the most different and complex. In Saudi Arabia, the king does not get a son from his father, but a brother from a brother, as King Salman himself got after his stepbrother, Abdullah bin Abdulaziz. So everyone thought that now King Salman, as tradition, would make the next generation senior and experienced prince a saint. And that's exactly what he did in the beginning. As soon as he came, he announced to his stepbrother, Mohammed bin Abdulaziz, that he would make him a crown prince. And he appointed his powerful nephew, Mohammed bin Naif, as Naif Wali Ahad. Mohammed bin Naif, i.e. MBN, was a very influential man, and at that time he was also the interior minister of the country. In Saudi Arabia, he had control over the entire security system. And yes, he was considered a very close and reliable man of America. At that time, MBS, i.e. Mohammed bin Salman, was not even in the picture. And anyway, he was not considered an important prince in the Saudi royal family. He was always hidden from his powerful cousins. Perhaps this is why we still see a deep insecurity in Mohammed bin Salman. He wants to do something big, and he wants to prove himself in front of his father, in front of the royal family, and in front of the world. But at that time, Mohammed bin Salman had one thing, something that everyone missed, that he was very fond of Shah Salman, and this was such a point that later came in handy for him. So the young MBS had a lot of qualities. He was very energetic. He was completely different from the ordinary princes of Saudi Arabia. It is said that he was a workaholic who worked 18 to 18 hours a day. Then he likes presentation, data, and charts a lot. He wants everything to be done immediately, right now, and this impatience was going to be his greatest strength and the biggest weakness. But what was missing in a prince's upbringing that made him impatient? For this, let's show you a side of Mohammed bin Salman's personality that very few people know. Ben Hubbard's book MBS, The Rise to Power of Mohammed bin Salman tells that MBS spent his youth playing video games, especially strategy games. Games like Call of Duty, Age of Empires, and Final Fantasy. And we can clearly see the impact of this on his personality. He sees the world as a big game in which you have to take risks, control resources, and most importantly, defeat your rivals. And this is where his risk-taker mindset was born. That is, now start making clues. An insecure, impatient risk-taker and a very ambitious person who knew that if he waited in a traditional way, then his turn would never come in life. Because Mohammed bin Salman was nowhere in the line of succession of Saudi Arabia. Not even far away. But then, he met a man who made his future easier. That is, King Salman bin Abdul Aziz himself. Yes, very few people know that MBS's real power is his father's blind trust in him. It was King Salman who broke every tradition, every principle, and paved the way for his son. And for this, the first move he took was amazing for everyone. As soon as he became king, he made Mohammed bin Salman the Minister of Defense of the country. Yes, a country like Saudi Arabia became the defense minister of the most powerful country in the Muslim world. A 29-year-old boy. Everyone was surprised, but the party had just started. In just a few days, Mohammed bin Salman was also made the head of the Council for Economic and Development Affairs. That means the country's economy, oil policy, and every major project was now in the hands of this boy. The time was coming. The work was slowly being done for MBS from behind the curtain. And then the real game started. The fate of the next round was in front of him. It had only been 3 months since King Salman became king that the first explosion occurred in April 2015. He removed Wali Ahad Mukrin bin Abdul Aziz from the way through a royal decree. And in his place, he made Mohammed bin Naif Wali Ahad. And who sat on the chair of Naif Wali Ahad? Who was going to be empty. Yes, MBS. In just one leap, he came second in the line of power. And then for 2 years, MBS used his power like an art. He secured control of the army, strengthened his grip on the economy, and used the media in his favor. Mohammed bin Salman made his own identity, the identity of a reformer, the identity of a prince who works, who is challenging the old and useless bureaucracy. And then that night came. June 2017. There was a rebellion overnight. There was a blast, and everything changed. Shah Salman also dismissed his nephew and most powerful crown prince, Mohammed bin Naif. It is said that MBS was called to the palace and locked up. He was pressurized, and then he was forced to resign. The man who was the second most powerful person in the country until yesterday. He was the favor of America. He remained a prisoner. And then who became the new crown prince instead of MBS? Yes, you got it right. Mohammed bin Salman. Only at the age of 31. It was a very silent but merciless rebellion. MBS had removed all the thorns of his path, each and every rival. In fact, he was now more powerful than the real king, and he was the real and one and only ruler of the country. And then Mohammed bin Salman showed the world a new dream, a dream that is going to become a reality, or is going to turn into a beautiful illusion. As soon as MBS came, he presented a very big, very magnificent, and very expensive plan, named Vision 2030. It was not just a plan. It was a dream of a new Saudi Arabia. The simple meaning of this vision is to change Saudi Arabia. Yes, it was a Saudi version of the slogan of change. Its biggest goal is to end the oil dependency of the Saudi economy. That is, Saudi Arabia will not only sell oil, it will also make money from tourism, technology, entertainment, and investment. Yes, MBS wants to run the country like a modern corporate. In fact, he is trying to run the kingdom like a corporation. Then MBS is not only investing in big companies like Uber, SoftBank, Newcastle United Football Club, etc., but he is also increasing his international influence. Then the path that MBS made for a new Saudi Arabia is of a very non-Saudi style. That is the way to take the country towards moderate Islam. We only return to what we were, the moderate Islam that is open to the world and all religions. 70% of the Saudi people are under 30 years old, and frankly, we will not waste 30 years of our lives in dealing with any extremist ideas. We will destroy them immediately today. We want to live a normal life. We want to live a life that translates our religion as forgiveness. Our customs and traditions are good. We want to live with the world and contribute to the development of our country and the country of the world. All those religious restrictions that were in Saudi Arabia from the beginning were softened. And then we also saw the change that no one could have imagined a few years ago. Women were allowed to drive in the country. Then the steps went further. Cinemas were open in countries like Saudi Arabia. Then there were big music concerts. There were fun fairs like Riyadh Season, in which big artists from all over the world started coming. Formula One race and golf tournaments were held. The arrival of tourists began, and for them, the doors of Medina were also opened. The Muslim world was surprised at what has happened to Saudi Arabia suddenly. They did not want to see all this happening on their holy land. But Mohammed bin Salman did not care about anyone. He went further. The religious police authorities were almost abolished. Now Saudi Arabia began to become an open society. Mohammed bin Salman gave a new social contract to the Saudi people. We will give you jobs, places of recreation, and social freedom. In return, you will give us your complete political loyalty and will not ask any questions. For this, Mohammed bin Salman did something that I will personally call his most dangerous work. That is to promote Saudi nationalism. How was Saudi Arabia established? This was a result of an agreement between a religious reformer, Mohammed bin Abdul Wahab, and the grandfather of the family of Saud, Mohammed bin Saud. The union of the two was formed in the 18th century due to the establishment of the first Saudi government. Since then, the children of the family of Sheikh Khazani Mohammed bin Abdul Wahab and the descendants of the family of Saud have run the country on the basis of the same ideology. That is, on the basis of the religion of Islam. But today, 350 years later, Saudi Arabia, a new Saudi Arabia, is being made such that it is neither based on its religious identity nor does it take any inspiration from tribal loyalty. For this, Mohammed bin Salman is giving a new identity to his youth, the identity of Saudi nationalism. And this is a very dangerous thing. How? Let me tell you. In fact, every nationalist movement does one thing first. It rewrites history. That is, it writes again. Every nationalist movement thinks that its nation is the highest, the biggest, the greatest. It is even bigger than religion. And I am saying this very seriously. You may have heard someone say that I have been a Muslim for 1,400 years, but I have been a Pathan or Sindhi for 5,000 years. Or whatever nation you want, you can fit it here. Yes, this is the psychology of nationalism, which is not in any other country, but it is certainly problematic there. The country that is made in the name of Islam, on whose flag there is written Talma. This is the act that was first seen in Turkey in the Muslim world, where Mustafa Kemal Pasha threw the religion out. We also saw this problem in the government of the Pahlavi family in Iran, which later resulted in a revolution. And we also saw this in the Egypt of Jamal Abdul Nasir, whose slogan had become, "We are the children of the Pharaoh." And today we are seeing the same thing in Saudi Arabia. That is, the country whose foundation was placed on religion, which has always been very close to Islam in its history. Because of Mecca and Medina, Islam is the center of the world, whose ruler calls himself Khadimi Harman Sharifine. Today, the same Saudi Arabia is being removed from Islam under a regular policy. Not openly, not in a clear way, but at least has been put on that path. See for yourself. The National Day was always celebrated in a simple way in Saudi Arabia. But in the era of MBS, this is a very big event, in which there are demonstrations of music and fireworks, and Saudi flags are waved everywhere. Now, Saudi history is also connected not from a religious angle, but before Islam with the era of ignorance. The ancient civilizations are being made a national heritage of Saudi Arabia, like Madani Salah. It is narrated in Hadith that when the Prophet was on a journey to Tabuk, the army passed through Madani Salah. At that time, the Prophet ordered the companions to pass through this area as soon as possible, because it is a place of divine punishment. But today, the same area is being presented as a national heritage in Saudi Arabia. It is being made an important spot for tourism. Why? Because such things feed the theory of nationalism. This is a very long-term plan, which will strengthen the kingdom in the country and will make the nation more and more great. And to fulfill this dream of greatness, the thing that always comes in handy are mega projects, from the arms of the era of Pharaoh to the emperors of engineering today. You see every king who wants to establish his legacy and is not able to do so with his actions and justice. Then he focuses on one thing, big buildings, that is, mega projects. That's why MBS also brought mega projects. Big, big. Seeing such projects, one goes crazy. Take Neom, for example, a $500 billion project. A city of the future on the banks of the Red Sea, where there will be no roads or cars. Everything will be done by robots through AI. In the same city, there will be a 170-kilometer-long mirror-like building, which will be called the Lime. Seeing all this, the whole world was inspired. The West started calling MBS a great reformer and a visionary leader. The youth of Saudi Arabia were also very happy. They hoped that now Saudi Arabia was really changing. But is this the whole picture? Is there a terrible darkness behind the sparkle? Of course there is. On the one hand, there was talk of a new Saudi Arabia. But on the other hand, MBS was also doing another thing. Very silently, but very mercilessly. His job was to strengthen his power completely and crush all kinds of differences. He showed the world that he has an iron hand in a velvet glove. That is, a hand of iron under the palm of a carpenter. The biggest example of this iron hand policy was the 1917 Red Sultan drama. As I said in the beginning, a luxury hotel in Riyadh was turned into a jail in one night. Governmentally, it was said that it was a war against corruption. But in reality, it was an operation to put all its powerful allies in one bar. One of the richest people in the world, Prince Walid ibn Talal, was imprisoned there. Among them was the powerful leader of the National Guard and the son of the former king, Prince Mutab bin Abdullah. All of them were imprisoned for several weeks. It came out that they were pressurized to deposit a large part of their wealth in the national treasury and take revenge for MBS's loyalty. It was not just arrests, it was a message for the entire Saudi elite that now there is only one boss, and his name is Mohammed bin Salman. Now whoever criticizes the policy a little is put in jail. It is clearly said that either praise it or stay quiet. Otherwise, the outcome will be bad. And we saw their most horrific example of iron grip in October 2018, almost 2,500 kilometers away from Riyadh in Istanbul. Istanbul is a city of happiness. But the Saudi journalist was faced with a serious problem. He needed some documents for his marriage, but he could not go to Saudi Arabia because he was arrested there for writing against Mohammed bin Salman. But he had to get the job done. He contacted the Saudi consulate in Istanbul and was called on October 2nd 2018. But a call was also made to Riyadh that the person is coming on October 2nd. The journalist's name was Jamal Khashoggi. He was a columnist of Middle East Eye and Washington Post, and the editor-in-chief of Al Arab News. But the real introduction was that he was a critic of MBS. That's why he lived in America. So on October 2nd, 2018, he entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to never come out again. His Turkish fiancée told him that Jamal had gone to consul for work, but spent the whole day and did not come out again. The CCTV footage showed him leaving, but no one saw him coming out. Where did Jamal go? Did he go to the ground or the sky? The Saudi and Turkish intelligence started the investigation, but there was no clue. And after many days, the Turkish intelligence made a discovery, a terrible discovery that shook the world. That Jamal Khashoggi was brutally murdered. The details of that murder are so terrible and so dangerous that I can't tell you here. In short, after killing him, his body was wasted and no part of it was left. But who did this in the consulate? This was the work of a 15-member death squad, which reached Istanbul from Riyadh on the same day, especially for this purpose. This squad included very close guards of Mohammed bin Salman. First, the Saudi government lied, but then the story changed. Not once, but many times. And finally, it was accepted that Jamal Khashoggi was murdered, but it was said that it was a one-off operation which the MBS had no idea about. Whatever it was, the result was that Saudi Arabia had to face a lot of embarrassment all over the world, and the bright image of the MBS had a mark on it that could never be erased. Then the secret reports say that it seems that the direct order of this murder was given by Mohammed bin Salman himself. What is the truth? We may never know. Or maybe after a few decades, when we look back at history, everything looks clear like a mirror. Anyway, on the one hand, the MBS had this iron grip, and on the other hand, it was his passion to create chaos all over the region. And this is where we see the foreign policy of the MBS. Since Mohammed bin Salman has been in power, his foreign policy has been very aggressive. He wants to make Saudi Arabia the leader of the region. But his big decisions were often made in a hurry, like his first big mistake, the Yemen War. In 2015, as soon as he became the new defense minister, he started a war against the Houthis in Yemen. He thought that this would end in a few weeks, but this war fell on his head. Years have passed, billions of dollars have been lost, Yemen has been destroyed, but the Houthis are still there. In fact, they are more powerful than ever before, and now they are also showing their eyes to America and Israel. In the case of Palestine, Yemen's actions have given it a lot of popularity in the Muslim world. After the Iran-Israel war, they are also playing a role in changing the power dynamics of the region, and Saudi Arabia can't do anything about them. That's why this war is considered the biggest military and political failure of the MBS. Not only that, they also made another big mistake. They boycotted Qatar. They thought that a small country like Qatar would give up in a few days. But Qatar didn't give up, and after 3.5 years, Saudi Arabia had to step back. In fact, Qatar has hosted the 2022 Football World Cup and has made a great image of itself all over the world. After these failures, we saw a shift in MBS's foreign policy. We saw maturity. Yemen's war has taught them that the policy of clashes in the region will never be successful. That's why in 2023, with the help of China, they have established diplomatic relations with their biggest enemy, Iran. This is a masterstroke, a step that no one was expecting. But it turns out that MBS has the ability to learn from mistakes, and they can make difficult decisions for the benefit of the region. Perhaps this was a reality check, because of which MBS's megaproject is coming back to its original place. NEOM's project, the line, has now been reduced to a large extent, where by 2030, the target was to accommodate 15 lakh people. It has now been reduced to only 3 lakh. And instead of 170 kilometers, attention is being paid to construction of only 2.4 kilometers. This also shows that seeing big dreams is one thing, but completing them is a completely different and big challenge. Now, let's see what the future holds. Today, once again, there is a big challenge ahead of MBS. Today's Middle East is changing very fast. This has become a very hostile region since Donald Trump came to America for the second time. The war between Iran and Israel has changed everything. In these circumstances, what will be the future of Saudi Arabia? Nothing can be said. But whatever happens, it will tell us who the real Mohammed bin Salman is. A reformer, a dreamer, or a king who understands mercilessness and power. Whatever happens. But right now we feel that there's only one word that decodes his entire personality, and that is disruptor. The one who destroys everything. The one who destroys everything. The one who wants to change everything. This is a real face of MBS. He does not accept the status quo, and he cannot wait. He wants results, and that too right now. Mohammed bin Salman, often abbreviated as MBS, has emerged as one of the most talked about leaders of the 21st century, a figure who dominates discussions about the Middle East, global energy, and the shifting dynamics of political authority. His rise to power was swift, unexpected to many, and marked by bold decisions that signaled a generational break from the older, more cautious style of Saudi governance. Unlike his predecessors, MBS stepped into global spotlight with flair for disruption, projecting himself as the face of a new Saudi Arabia determined to modernize and diversify. His youth alone was remarkable. Becoming crown prince in his early 30s made him one of the youngest leaders to wield such influence on the world stage. That youthfulness was not only a matter of age, but also an ideological positioning, where he presented himself as impatient with stagnation, unwilling to accept slow reforms, and determined to transform Saudi Arabia at a pace many found unthinkable. Observers began to describe him as a disruptor in the mold of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, rather than a traditional royal heir. His language, style, and ambitions reflected this disruptive mentality. He did not merely want to adjust Saudi Arabia's trajectory, but to rewrite it completely. This ambition was evident in his economic programs, his foreign policy maneuvers, and his cultural reforms, which collectively sought to redefine Saudi Arabia's role both regionally and globally. At the same time, his rise raised pressing questions. Was this disruption sustainable, and at what cost would it come? Analysts debated whether he was a visionary reformer or an authoritarian opportunist. The truth, many argued, lay somewhere in between, making MBS a complex and controversial figure who defies simplistic categorization. His very identity as Saudi Arabia's ultimate disruptor captures the paradoxes of his leadership. Modern yet autocratic, reformist yet repressive, daring yet risky. At the heart of MBS's disruptive vision is his ambitious project known as Vision 2030, a sweeping plan designed to reduce Saudi Arabia's dependence on oil and reposition the kingdom as a hub of innovation, tourism, and investment. For decades, Saudi Arabia's wealth and influence were tied almost exclusively to its vast oil reserves, making the economy dangerously vulnerable to fluctuations in global energy markets. MBS identified this vulnerability and declared that the country must break free from its addiction to oil, a statement that shocked many within the kingdom for its bluntness. Vision 2030 was not merely a set of reforms, but a bold declaration of intent. Saudi Arabia would embrace diversification, develop non-oil industries, and modernize its workforce to compete globally. Among its most high-profile initiatives was a plan to partially privatize Saudi Aramco, the state oil giant, in what became the largest IPO in history. Beyond economics, Vision 2030 also sought to transform Saudi society by encouraging entertainment, tourism, and cultural openness, domains that had long been tightly restricted under conservative interpretations of religion. MBS's disruptive mind saw these sectors as not only economic opportunities, but also tools for reshaping national identity. He understood that for reforms to succeed, Saudi youth, who make up the majority of the population, needed to feel invested in a future beyond oil. Yet critics pointed out that Vision 2030, while ambitious, relied heavily on centralized control and rapid decision-making, raising concerns about execution, transparency, and feasibility. Was MBS attempting too much too quickly? Or was his disruptive speed precisely what a stagnant system required to break free from inertia? These questions continue to define debates about his leadership and the future of Saudi Arabia. Cultural disruption has been one of the most visible aspects of MBS's reign, with changes that would have been unimaginable only a decade ago. For decades, Saudi Arabia was synonymous with conservative Wahhabi traditions, where entertainment, music, and gender mixing in public spaces were heavily restricted. MBS, however, moved quickly to dismantle some of these barriers, presenting himself as a modernizer unafraid to confront entrenched norms. He lifted the ban on women driving, a move that became symbolic of broader social change, and he permitted cinemas, concerts, and sporting events that were previously outlawed. These decisions were not merely symbolic but strategic, as they sought to address the aspirations of Saudi youth who long felt constrained by rigid rules. By opening up new spaces for leisure, entertainment, and cultural participation, MBS signaled a new era for the kingdom. His actions were also carefully framed for international audiences, who often criticized Saudi Arabia for its conservative restrictions. The reforms, therefore, served dual purposes, satisfying domestic demand for change while improving the kingdom's global image. Still, these cultural shifts were not without controversy. Conservative clerics and segments of society resisted, seeing them as threats to Saudi Arabia's religious identity. Yet MBS responded to such resistance with an iron hand, marginalizing clerical influence and consolidating state authority over religion. In this sense, his cultural reforms were both disruptive and authoritarian, liberal in outcome but coercive in method. This blend of openness and control reflects the paradox at the heart of MBS's leadership. He modernizes while centralizing, liberates while repressing, and disrupts while ensuring ultimate loyalty to himself. Foreign policy has been another arena where MBS's disruptive instincts have shaped Saudi Arabia's trajectory. He sought to redefine the kingdom's regional role from a cautious, behind-the-scenes actor to a bold and assertive power. His approach to Iran exemplifies this shift, as he positioned Saudi Arabia as the primary counterweight to Tehran's influence across the Middle East. This rivalry played out in proxy conflicts, particularly in Yemen, where MBS launched a military intervention in 2015 with the aim of defeating the Houthi rebels and curbing Iranian influence. The war, however, quickly became a quagmire, drawing international condemnation for its humanitarian toll and raising doubts about MBS's strategic judgment. Beyond Yemen, MBS also disrupted traditional alliances, deepening ties with the United States under Donald Trump while simultaneously pursuing unprecedented outreach to Israel, signaling a willingness to upend decades of Arab consensus on the Palestinian issue. His willingness to recalibrate long-standing positions revealed a pragmatic, disruptive approach. Loyalty to tradition mattered less than seizing opportunities that aligned with his vision of Saudi Arabia as a regional superpower. Yet his boldness also generated unpredictability, making allies uneasy and enemies emboldened. His blockade of Qatar in 2017 further demonstrated his willingness to use disruptive tactics, though it ultimately ended in reconciliation after several years. Analysts remain divided on whether these foreign policy moves reveal strategic genius or reckless improvisation. Regardless, they reflect MBS's refusal to accept the passive, status quo role that Saudi Arabia once played, instead pushing the kingdom into the center of global geopolitical contests. One of the most striking features of MBS's leadership is his relationship with power itself, which is wielded in ways that are both innovative and ruthless. His rise to crown prince in 2017 was accompanied by a dramatic reshuffling of the royal hierarchy, sidelining older, more experienced princes and consolidating authority in his own hands. This move was unprecedented in a system that traditionally operated through consensus and balance among royal factions. To reinforce his dominance, MBS launched a sweeping anti-corruption campaign that saw dozens of princes, businessmen, and officials detained in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Riyadh. The spectacle was both theatrical and strategic. While framed as a fight against corruption, it also eliminated rivals and sent a clear message about his determination to centralize authority. By doing so, he disrupted the long-standing norms of Saudi royal politics, where power sharing was a rule and dramatic purges were rare. His willingness to upend traditions that had guided the House of Saud for decades revealed his disruptive mindset. Survival and success required not incrementalism, but decisive breaks with the past. Yet this concentration of power also raised concerns. Could one man, however energetic and ambitious, effectively manage the complexities of governing a vast and diverse kingdom? Would the absence of checks and balances make the system more brittle over time? These questions underscore the risk of disruption when applied to political structures. For supporters, MBS represented a necessary strong hand capable of pushing through reforms against resistance. For critics, he symbolized authoritarian overreach disguised as modernization. Either way, his approach made clear that disruption for MBS was not limited to the economy or culture. It extended to the very foundations of Saudi governance. Technology and futuristic ambition are central to MBS's disruptive vision, with projects that aim to transform Saudi Arabia into a global hub of innovation. Perhaps the most emblematic of these is NEOM, a planned megacity on the Red Sea, described as a city of the future powered by renewable energy, artificial intelligence, and advanced infrastructure. NEOM, according to MBS, will not only serve as a model for urban living, but also symbolize the kingdom's leap into the future, beyond oil dependency and traditional industries. The project includes a proposed linear city stretching hundreds of kilometers without cars, designed to run entirely on clean energy. These futuristic projects reflect MBS's Silicon Valley-like mentality. Disruption through audacity, where impossible-sounding ideas are pursued as a matter of national destiny. Supporters argue that such initiatives position Saudi Arabia as a leader in global innovation, attracting investment, talent, and attention from around the world. Critics, however, view them as overly ambitious and potentially unsustainable, questioning whether they are more public relations exercises than practical ventures. Beyond NEOM, MBS has also emphasized digital transformation, promoting fintech, smart cities, and a knowledge-based economy as part of Vision 2030. His interest in technology also extends to surveillance, with the kingdom investing heavily in cyber capabilities and digital control tools to monitor dissent and maintain internal stability. This duality, innovation on one hand, authoritarian surveillance on the other, captures the disruptive paradox of MBS's technological ambitions. His projects inspire awe for their scale and vision, while also raising unease about the blending of progress with control. In this sense, technology under MBS becomes both a promise of liberation and an instrument of authority, reflecting the complexities of his disruptive leadership. MBS's disruptive style is also evident in how he manages Saudi Arabia's global image, which has long been shaped by oil wealth, religious conservatism, and human rights controversies. Under his leadership, the kingdom embarked on an aggressive rebranding campaign, seeking to position itself as an open, modernizing society attractive to tourists, investors, and global partners. High-profile sporting events, concerts, and cultural festivals became part of the strategy, with Saudi Arabia hosting Formula One races, heavyweight boxing matches, and international music festivals. These events were not only about entertainment, but also about reshaping perceptions of Saudi Arabia as a country ready to engage with the world on new terms. This rebranding effort is a textbook example of disruptive marketing, challenging entrenched stereotypes and replacing them with sleek, futuristic images of Saudi modernity. Yet this strategy has been complicated by international controversies, most notably the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018, which sparked global outrage and cast a long shadow over MBS's reformist image. Critics accuse him of using cultural and sporting spectacles as image laundering to distract from human rights abuses. Nevertheless, MBS pressed forward, arguing that the kingdom's transformation must not be derailed by external criticism. His confidence in rebranding efforts reflects his disruptive conviction that perception can be reshaped as decisively as policy. While the Khashoggi affair damaged his credibility in Western capitals, it did not derail his broader campaign to make Saudi Arabia appear indispensable to global economic, political, and cultural networks. This duality, simultaneous reform and repression, modernization and controversy, underscores the disruptive nature of his leadership on the global stage. The role of religion under MBS provides another lens into his disruptive thinking. For decades, Saudi Arabia's legitimacy rested on a pact between the royal family and the religious establishment, granting clerics significant influence over public life. MBS has challenged this arrangement more directly than any of his predecessors. By curbing the power of the religious police, promoting entertainment, and supporting women's greater participation in society, he has effectively sidelined a conservative clerical establishment. In public statements, he has spoken of returning Saudi Arabia to a moderate Islam, signaling his intent to reshape the kingdom's religious identity for the 21st century. This approach disrupted not only domestic norms, but also the perception of Saudi Arabia across the Muslim world, where the kingdom has long been viewed as a guardian of Islamic orthodoxy. Critics argue that MBS's reforms are selective, aim at reducing religious influence only when it conflicts with his modernization agenda, while still using religion as a tool of legitimacy when convenient. Nonetheless, the rebalancing of power between the state and religion marks a profound break with tradition. By placing religion firmly under state authority, MBS has centralized control in unprecedented ways, making the kingdom's religious identity an extension of his political vision. This disruption is both radical and risky. It may modernize Saudi society, but also risks alienating conservative elements who feel betrayed by the erosion of traditional values. At the same time, many young Saudis welcome the changes, viewing them as long overdue. Thus, MBS's disruption of religion highlights the generational divide in Saudi society, as well as the boldness and danger of attempting to redefine a nation's spiritual identity in pursuit of modernization. Economically, MBS's disruptive ambitions go far beyond Vision 2030's headline projects. He has sought to transform Saudi Arabia into a global investment powerhouse, positioning the Public Investment Fund (PIF) as one of the most influential sovereign wealth funds in the world. Under his direction, the PIF has invested billions in technology companies, electric vehicles, entertainment, and global sports. These investments are not merely financial but strategic, designed to project Saudi influence across diverse sectors of the global economy. By backing companies like Uber or investing in electric car startups, MBS signaled that Saudi wealth would no longer be confined to oil, but would actively shape the industries of the future. The PIF has also been central to Saudi Arabia's domestic transformation, funding megaprojects like NEOM, tourism developments, and infrastructure upgrades. This dual strategy, global outreach and domestic modernization, reflects MBS's disruptive belief that Saudi Arabia must simultaneously integrate with global markets while reinventing its local economy. Critics, however, warn that such reliance on state-directed investment risks inefficiency, corruption, and overconcentration of resources. Moreover, global economic shifts, such as volatility in oil prices or downturns in tech valuations, pose challenges to the kingdom's grand ambitions. Yet for MBS, disruption means embracing risk as the price of transformation. He has repeatedly argued that Saudi Arabia can no longer afford caution, insisting that bold investment strategies are essential to securing long-term prosperity. This risk-taking mentality, unusual for traditional Saudi leadership, further cements his reputation as a disruptor who is willing to gamble on big ideas to reshape his country's future. Ultimately, understanding MBS as Saudi Arabia's ultimate disruptor requires grappling with the contradictions that define his leadership. On one hand, he has spearheaded reforms that were once unthinkable, empowering women, opening cultural spaces, diversifying the economy, and reducing the influence of religious conservatism. On the other hand, he has concentrated power, repressed dissent, and pursued risky policies that have destabilized both the kingdom and the region. This duality is not accidental but central to his disruptive approach, which combines visionary ambition with ruthless pragmatism. His boldness reflects a generational impatience, the sense that Saudi Arabia cannot wait decades to modernize but must leap forward in dramatic fashion. Yet disruption is by nature destabilizing, and MBS's legacy would depend on whether his ambitious transformations can endure or whether they will collapse under the weight of their contradictions. For now, he remains a figure who commands global attention, shaping debates about the future of energy, technology, religion, and governance. Admirers see him as a visionary who dragged Saudi Arabia into the modern age against all odds. Critics see him as an authoritarian who cloaks repression in the language of reform. The reality, as always, lies in the tension between these extremes. To step inside the mind of MBS is to encounter a restless ambition unwilling to accept the world as it is, always striving to remake according to his own vision. Whether history will judge him as a reformer, a despot, or both, one thing is certain. Mohammed bin Salman has redefined what it means to rule Saudi Arabia, and in doing so, has secured his place as one of the most disruptive leaders of our era. In the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, a new kind of leader has emerged, one who refuses to be bound by tradition, expectation, or caution. Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, has become a figure both admired and feared, reshaping his kingdom with a speed and audacity few thought possible. To some, he is a visionary reformer determined to free Saudi Arabia from the chains of oil dependency and religious conservatism. To others, he is an authoritarian who masks repression with promises of modernization. Yet no matter where one stands, his presence is impossible to ignore. In a world where power often moves slowly, MBS thrives on disruption, dismantling old norms and replacing them with his own bold vision. His leadership has sparked headlines across the globe, from allowing women to drive and building futuristic megacities, to waging wars and silencing critics. Each move he makes feels like a deliberate shock to the system, a reminder that Saudi Arabia under his rule will no longer be predictable. But what drives this restless ambition? Is it the impatience of youth, the weight of history, or the desire to cement his place on the world stage? Understanding MBS requires stepping into the mind of a leader who thrives on paradox, liberalizing and repressing, modernizing and centralizing, innovating and controlling. He is not merely steering his country. He is attempting to redefine it, and in the process, he is rewriting the narrative of the Middle East itself. This is the story of MBS, the ultimate disruptor of Saudi Arabia. And for his purpose, he can break every principle, every tradition. Now, whether it will be good or bad for Saudi Arabia, where will it take the country? It will be decided by history. What do you think about Mohammed bin Salman? Tell us in the comments.